We are dissecting Escape the Backrooms completely start to finish. From how all the levels work behind the scenes and off camera, to what can be found out of bounds, and even what happens when we try to break the game by forcing it to do things it isn't supposed to do. Now that the game has been officially released with all the maps, this will be your one-stop shop for breaking the game. Along the way, you'll get brief recaps of each section to help remind you of things you may have forgotten. As such, you'll also find timestamps for each part. So we are starting with level 0. So the very first level we complete is the lobby, and within it is a seemingly endless maze of these faded yellow walls. We must make our way through these winding halls until we find a broken ladder, and after putting it back together, we will obtain a key used to reach the exit. Also, after a few minutes, this level's entity, the Howler, will start appearing on the map, giving chase whenever it spots you. Before you can exit this level, you must locate the locked door and then cross the pitfalls without losing your balance. Falling into these holes will drop you onto the second layer, where you will ultimately need to locate a separate exit. But now let's rewind time and take a closer look at this level. So first off, I want to see what the player model looks like from another angle. And well, let's just say we didn't enter level 0 unarmed. The player's right arm is completely missing, and there's a floating set of arms directly in front of our torso. When the player is sprinting, these arms will actually retract upwards above our head, and it's pretty funny looking. Although I probably don't need to mention it, we are also missing our head, making us the scariest monster within this maze. Of course, the removed head and the arms in front of us are for the first-person camera, so we can get a perspective of our arms during certain movements. Next, let's take a look at the entirety of this map from an aerial view. And in doing so, we'll find that it's not in fact infinite. This map is pretty massive though, especially considering there are 2 layers for the player to explore. Looking at them from the side really gives you perspective on how large this area actually is. Hovering way out of bounds, we can find a large gray time card with a date and time on it just floating out here. While I was flying around this map, I also noticed something else that was quite interesting. Just behind the area where the player spawns in, there is a small box made of these yellow walls, and within it is the Howler themselves. They're just kind of hanging out in here, waiting to be called into the map. The reason they are contained in a box is that 1, they don't move, but 2, they're boxed in so that their visibility cannot see the player anywhere on the map. This is so the Howler can't spot you through walls that may only be rendered on one side. Putting this concept to the test, at this point I decided to break down the wall behind the player's spawn and take a look at them myself. And although they have no way to reach the player, they will still begin howling with their chase music playing in the background. It was a little noisy for my taste though, so I dropped them into the void. Ah, peace at last. Speaking of the Howler though, I want to see how they work within the map itself. So I restarted the level and began heading through the maze. Once the monster spawns in, you can see that they just sort of appear not far from the player. While they're out of sight, they will also begin teleporting to random locations near the player, so that the player can never truly lose them entirely. If this wasn't done, it'd be possible for the player to never see the monster at all. Moving into their line of sight, we can watch from another perspective as they pursue the player and eventually jump scare us. Their jump scare animation shows them violently grappling the player before we explode into half a dozen or so pieces. They are definitely a lot stronger than they look. Now upon respawning, I stumbled upon something quite bizarre. Near this area where you spawn in, there's another copy of myself just kind of standing there. Only this copy had its head and arms still attached. How do I know that this is me, you ask? Well, killing them also kills me. I guess what they say is true. Trust nobody, not even yourself. This possible accidental duplication had to have occurred at some point while I was breaking the game. I'm just not exactly sure how, unless it had a different purpose. Before moving on, I want to see what the animation looks like when we climb the ladder to obtain the key. And I was not disappointed. When we begin climbing the ladder, our disconnected arms just sort of appear at the top, where they grab the key and then T-pose their way back down. If we take a look at that shelf, we'll also find that the key never leaves this spot after we grab it. That's it for this map though, so let's head into level 1, the Habitable zone. So upon reaching the next level, we enter this large parking lot area. We immediately find an elevator that requires a code to access, and you're supposed to use the cars in the far end of the garage to obtain said code. I, accidentally guessed the code though, so that saves me a quick trip across the parking lot. After reaching the next floor, we must obtain 4 keys that are required to open a vault door, all while avoiding the skin stealer, this floor's entity. Heading downstairs, we must venture into the darkness and locate an elevator that will take us to the next floor. Once more, trying to avoid the skin stealer. From here, we must unlock this large gate, and to do so, we must pass through the hub. The hub is a room that can be accessed in various ways, including through hidden doors found within certain levels. Beyond this room, there's a hallway where we solve a puzzle and then open the gate using a computer. Heading through said gate, you will enter yet another parking garage where we must avoid the darkness or risk being jump scared by the smilers. You must search these hallways to find the exit, where you will then move on to Pipe Dream, a massive, dimly lit tunnel. Heading to the left, we eventually come to an unlit hallway, and after grabbing a flashlight, we will be chased through the dark by another smiler. This leads us to the electrical station where the next level begins. So going back in time, we can take a look around this garage area with the lights on. And it's a lot less scary this way. There really isn't much to see on this first floor though, so we're going to head down the elevator to the Skin Stealer's domain. The very first thing I want to do was take a look at them up close. And with the lights on, we can see every terrifying detail. They have a giant vertical mouth lined with sharp teeth, stretching from their head down to their waist, and what looks like blood all over their body. We can watch them attack the player from another perspective. They will begin sprinting toward us, and upon coming in contact with the player, their jump scare animation plays out. What's interesting is at the moment we die, the Skin Stealer, well, steals our skin. They will A-pose for a split second before taking the form of their victim. I, of course, couldn't move on before getting my revenge, so I destroyed a bit of the floor and then let them fall endlessly into the void. Now, before we move on, I wanted to see if we could make this level a bit more difficult. So I spawned in 4 extra Skin Stealers before attempting it again. Now, as per usual, they spend most of their time in the back section of the garage, and I felt pretty confident I could simply sneak by them. However, I somehow managed to alert 3 of them pretty much immediately. After they had left, I attempted to sneak alongside them into the back, and sadly, caught their attention once more. As I tried to use the door to evade them, they managed to catch up to me, and I unfortunately died. We're not done with these guys yet though, as I went back through the map and spawned in a ton of Skin Stealers. They just sort of wander around this map, and they almost look like Sims characters as they do. It's pretty fun to watch. Also, some of them have a strange infatuation with walls, and they'll just sort of stare at them for long periods of time. Glorious! Still with the place now infested by these terrifying monsters, I head back in, and immediately alert the horde. With so many of them in the area, it's pretty much impossible to evade them, and I instantly die again. You win this round, Skin Stealers. Moving on to the next floor, this garage area is typically super dark. And it's not regular darkness either. This is advanced darkness. The flashlight really doesn't do anything here, and we must wander this multi-floor parking area practically blind. With the lights on though, it's a lot easier to navigate. Flying out of bounds, we can take another look at this area. And while doing so, I noticed something pretty cool. Behind some of these locked doors, we'll find a couple of fence pieces and what looks like an elevator shaft. There are a handful of these throughout this level, and I believe these are potential locations where the elevator can spawn in. Each time this map is reloaded, the elevator will change its position, and the other possible spawn locations will have their doors locked. Beyond this, there really isn't a lot to look at in this map, so let's move on. So typically, we have to unlock this door in order to access the next part of the level. But ain't nobody got time for that. So we destroy the door, and then head into this large parking area. Now typically, this area has flickering lights and a bunch of smilers just staring you down. But because we never used that switch to open the door, we've broken the game's usual sequence of events. That means we can explore this area safely without having to worry about smilers. We can also walk upstairs and check it out, and only after breaking the game this way did I realize that this was an explorable part of the map. There are a couple of hallways up here and a few doors as well, but none of them lead anywhere. I later learned that these smilers are also incapable of accessing this ramp, and if we can make it up here during regular gameplay, we'll be completely safe. Now, if we wanted to, we could locate the exit door and proceed onto the next level. But before doing so, let's backtrack and take a look at the hub. So after heading through that smaller door, we enter a completely separate map. Zooming out, we'll see that this hub area is actually a lengthy S-shaped tunnel. We're unable to explore beyond this main area due to some invisible barriers, but if we move the player beyond them, we can take a look for ourselves. There is nothing over here on this side though, so I decided to head to the other side, where I found that this section actually extends just beyond the tunnel. There's a small bit of road sticking out here, with 2 road signs on either side. And we can also see that the entrance itself is encased in brick. Now, if we take a look underneath that security room, we will actually find an isothermal container. It's a small cylindrical container with wheels, and 2 containers of acetylene right beside it. I don't remember encountering this during my playthrough of this area, so I'm not exactly sure of its purpose. If you guys know what this is, let me know in the comments. Also in the void, we'll find a small piece of what looks like roofing or flooring of some kind, with a hole punched out of the center. It's just floating out here not far from that container. And once more, I'm not sure what this is for. Now within the main tunnel area, we'll find a handful of doors, and they can only be accessed after being unlocked in their respective levels. Taking a look out of bounds, we'll find that most of these doors lead to a small room. It's actually really cool taking a look at these rooms from out here, as they're each themed after the level they grant access to. Some of these are incomplete with missing walls and ceilings, and others are fully modeled and furnished inside. So when we enter the security area and turn the lights on, we'll see an area similar to level 0 just beyond this window. Entering this area, with the lighting effects turned off though, we will see that before we turn the power on, the level 0 area simply doesn't exist. This window leads straight into the void, and we can even see the tunnel in the distance. The moment we turn the power on, it will seem to magically appear out of thin air. This area does in fact have walkable ground though, so if we move the player inside, we can take a look around for ourselves. That's it for the hub though, so let's open the gate and head back to the parking garage area. So now that the gate has been opened properly, the smilers are now spawning as intended. It's a bit harder playing through this portion of the game with the lights on though, as we can't see when this garage goes dark. We can, however, take a closer look at the smilers, and they are super creepy looking. They almost remind me of the SCP-087 face, or even the Smile Dog. We can also watch from another angle as they jump scare the player, and as you can see, they sort of just duck downwards and then leap onto our model. But now, let's mess with our creepy, grinning adversaries. I feel like escaping them on this ramp wasn't enough, and instead we have to get rid of them for good. So I deleted a bunch of the floor panels within this map and then planted myself directly in the center. My plan was to lure them towards me and then drop them into the endless void. But fate had other plans. They begin heading towards me and fall into the hole, but they manage to get close enough to my player controller and they trigger a jump scare. They're currently in a free fall, so the animation does not play out, but we still die anyway. But we're not done yet! We can build our defenses stronger! We have the technology! This time I went to the very far side of the garage and cut out a large section of the floor, hypothetically large enough that they will be incapable of reaching the player. So I put myself on this little island of safety, and they come after me once again. This time we are successful, and they begin falling into the vast nothingness of space. They fall far below this map, and at this point I believe I've beaten them for good. However, one of the smilers somehow managed to get behind me, and the moment I touch this wall, I get jump scared. I was not expecting this to happen, and it gave me a pretty good scare. So in my desperation, I did the only logical thing I could think of. I summoned a few dozen more smilers. Ironically, this was the only method of stopping them that worked, as loading too many of them at the same time seemed to break their AI. Because of this, they're unable to follow me, and I can even walk through them without getting jump scared. Welp, I guess we'll call it a draw. Now, let's take a quick look at pipe dreams. The moment we exit this parking garage, we find ourselves within a massive tunnel. This thing is incredibly large, and it stretches way into the distance. I honestly felt like it would never end during my playthrough, which is pretty on brand for the Backrooms. If we head down the right side of the hallway, reaching a certain point will spawn in a smiler. Unlike the others though, this one is actually fully modeled with a completely black spider-like body. This particular smiler will only pursue the player as long as they are trying to enter this side of the tunnel, and we can watch as they load and unload as we hit their trigger. Moving the camera beyond this trigger, we'll see a small orange room with a ladder inside. This is actually the entrance to a level called Fun, which we will access a bit later in the game. For now, it is simply an empty hallway, and cannot be used even if we move the player over here. What's kinda interesting is that while I was over here, another smiler spawned in and began heading towards me. I hid inside this little room, and after passing me, they actually just left the map entirely, endlessly running into the empty space. So now it's time to mess with this creature a little bit, only this time I wanted to make them far more menacing than before. So I spawned in a ton of them all at once, and because they were moving as I did, it resulted in this horrifying centipede. They're truly a thing of nightmares, and the sound they made was equally terrifying. Have a listen. They continued to crawl their way towards me, and it was incredibly intimidating watching this beast approach. When they finally reached me, they began a chain of jump scares. One after another, they lunged forward, and they even split into 2 separate centipedes at one point. Then they continued on, searching for their next victim. But with that brings us to the end of these first areas in Escape the Backrooms. So after completing Pipe Dreams, you find yourself at the entrance to the electrical station. This is an abandoned electrical facility that is full of winding brick tunnels and lethal hazards. And as you progress through each substation, the danger only increases. This level is pretty large and full of dead ends, which only makes it harder to escape the horrifying entities within. So let's do a quick recap of everything that takes place inside this area. So upon loading into the level, we come to a locked gate. And just beside it is a breaker box showing which parts of the station have power. A door opens behind us, and from here, we must make our way through this labyrinth of tunnels, turning on breaker boxes in order to finish the level. After the first 3 boxes have been turned on, we can continue to the next substation, where we will have our first encounter with the Hounds, this level's entity. We can blind them with our flashlight temporarily, and doing so 3 times will result in them running away. We must also be careful not to step in the puddles that are charged with electricity, as they will immediately kill the player. After each breaker has been turned on, we then head all the way back to the starting area, where we then continue on to the abandoned offices. Okay, now let's restart this level and turn those lights on. So of course, the first thing I wanted to do was get an aerial view of this map. And upon doing so, you can see how expansive it really is. Taking a look around this map with the lights on is a pretty cool experience as well, considering it's typically so dark you can't really see anything. Now, in the second substation, we can move the camera and take a closer look at the Hound. And, well, they look like an old man and a dog fused together. They have patchy black hair on their head, jet black eyes, and crooked, sharp teeth. Also, they have what looks like a goatee stretching down to the bottom of their neck. Their body is mostly dog-like and is covered in what looks like cracks or scars. Overall, this abhorrent fusion of man and beast makes this level a lot scarier. It'll take more than a Philosopher's Stone to fix this creepy dude. If we watch from another perspective, we can see that this Hound will remain unmoving until we hit their trigger, where they will begin to chase the player. We can also view their jump scare from a different angle. And the moment this animation occurs, they'll begin clipping through the ground. They freeze for just a moment before violently shaking their head as the player dies. Now, what's interesting is that throughout this facility, there are multiple Hounds, but their AI doesn't always behave the same way. This first encounter was one of the level's scripted chases, where the Hound will remain in place until you activate them. If we move the camera though, we'll find that there are already Hounds spawned into these later rooms. These other Hounds are not coded to appear when a trigger is hit, but instead they are loaded into the map and will patrol indefinitely. Heading back to that first encounter, we can also see that the scripted Hound will unload as soon as they return to their starting position. Finally, there's a third type of Hound within this level that has a slightly different AI than others. These guys are loaded in standing in place, and will only move when the player enters their line of sight. But now, let's restart this level and break some stuff. So first I went back to the hallway where the first chase occurs, and I destroyed some of the floor near the end of the hallway. I was, of course, curious to see if they will still try to reach us now that they don't have a direct path to the player. After activating the Hound, they began barreling towards us, and as you can see, our mission was a success as they fall into the darkness below, fated to endlessly run into the emptiness of space. Next, I decided that the best way to escape the Hounds was to simply avoid them. So I moved the player up onto the roof and did just that. As you can see, the roof is in fact walkable ground, but it's only visible from within this building. This means we can freely walk around without being spotted, and we can still see where we're going. I make my way over to that first Hound encounter once more, and accidentally fall between the walls. These large hallways actually create several hidden alleys out of bounds. Only, they are not meant to be accessed, so there's no way to escape if you fall in. So, I have to restart the level. That's it for this particular level though, so let's blast the gate away and continue on. No Hounds, no puddles, no worries. So after entering the stairwell, we end up at the abandoned offices, a large office building with a roaring thunderstorm outside. Now this level is a bit different than the previous since there are no entities present on this map, and in general, it seems that this level is used to stock up on resources. In order to reach the next level, we must solve a puzzle using some vending machines and then make our way to an area that is under surveillance. You have to avoid being spotted by security cameras as you make your way to the end of this level. And even if a single camera sees us, we must climb through the vents back to the start of the level. We'll also be greeted by this, friendly message. If we are successful in evading the cameras, the door will be unlocked and we can continue on to the next level. But now let's rewind time and take another look at this giant office location. To start, we can take a quick look at this map in its entirety, and it's actually pretty massive. There are tons of rooms to look through, and it's hard to fully grasp the size of this office space from inside. When looking through the office windows, you can see what looks like another area outside. Only, it never changes its position as we move around. It looks like a subway station of some kind, although it's hard to tell due to the rain covering them. The rain effects in the subway overlay are actually applied directly to the window, which is why they're no longer visible when flying out of bounds. The windows on the other side of the room have these black boxes surrounding them, and I believe these are used to prevent the player from seeing the rest of the map, because if we delete them, we can clearly see the building on the other side. This trick is also used near the hub entrance of this map, only this time it's a single black rectangle instead of multiple smaller ones. Speaking of the hub door, if we take a look inside, we'll see that it's a small, mostly empty bit of tunnel with black barriers on either side. Something else that's pretty cool is that the screens at the end of the level are in fact showing a live feed of this map. If I stand in front of them and move the camera over to the security monitors, I will be able to see myself in them. Even though the cameras are rotating back and forth in the level itself, the screens remain static and only update once every few seconds. Now as we play through the map, there are frequent flashes of lightning visible through the windows. Moving outside the map, we will see that this effect is actually a giant bolt of lightning. It is absolutely massive, stretching beyond the length of this entire map. We can also see what looks like sheets of rain falling as the lightning illuminates this area. It's pretty cool looking. Before we continue forward, I wanted to test a theory. If we walk across the roof of the office itself, will the cameras still be able to spot us? There's only one way to find out. So I moved the player onto the roof and began making my way to the exit. Eventually, I got to the security office, and somehow the cameras were still able to spot me, and the door remained locked. So I just break down the door and continue onward. In the next level, we find ourselves in the lobby of Terror Hotel. To quickly recap this level, we start by solving a puzzle using the paintings in order to unlock the door. Equipped with a can of bug spray, we have to find the male death moths, which we then hit with bug spray to acquire moth jelly. After collecting 3 jellies, we send them down the chute in the hallway, which gives us the keys required to use the elevator. Arriving on the next floor, our objective is to obtain 7 pieces of paper that are hidden in various hotel rooms. Only this time, we're not alone. There are both a hound and a skin stealer present on this map, and we must avoid them as we go. After putting all 7 papers in their slots, we look up at the ceiling to find a code has now appeared. We use this code on door 235's padlock and then enter the boiler room. In this part of the level, we're meant to traverse the maze in order to find the exit, being careful not to alert the female death moths along the way. Going back in time, I decided to take a quick look out of bounds. It turns out that the entirety of this map is placed on top of a large square of carpet, and by deleting one of the walls, I was able to take a step outside and explore these out-of-bounds areas. While exploring out here, I stumbled across 2 lamps that aren't attached to anything, just kind of floating beneath the top floor. There were also these red carpets that extended outwards from the ballroom doors. That's it for stuff out here, so let's head back into the map. So when we obtain the moth jelly, it is put into this wooden chute and is then lowered downwards. But I was curious how this worked behind the scenes. As you can see, the moment we press the button, it is moved down through the floor, where it then comes to a stop. After a brief moment, it just magically turns into a key. It then rises back up, where we are then able to grab it. There's really not much to look at on this floor though, so let's jump ahead. So the first thing I noticed here is that this map's design is a bit more interesting when viewed from the outside. Just like the previous area, this entire map sits on a flat plane that is textured with the hotel's carpet. Only, this level is not floating alone in the void. Instead, this area is surrounded by a massive white cube. There's also this large brick tower connected to the hotel's exit, and it stretches quite a ways into the sky. Taking a look inside it has a winding staircase that leads all the way up to the top, but it simply leads to a solid wall. Just outside this wall, there's a large black cube similar to the ones used to obscure the windows. Now, something that I didn't mention previously is that the game has a sandy bar, and when it gets low, you'll begin to hallucinate and see what I believe are smilers. As I was exploring this level, they begin appearing around my player, and here you can see from another angle what this looks like. Throughout this level, there are a few locked doors that we cannot access, and looking beyond them reveals that there is no room to enter. They actually just lead to this open area, and moving the player out here is pretty surreal. This empty space out of bounds feels like we're exploring the backrooms of the backrooms. We can also watch the skin stealer roam about, as the walls are transparent from the outside. They can't see us for the most part, but if we get too close, we can in fact trigger them to change into their monster form. But we're out of sight, and therefore out of mind, so he just keeps strutting along. So back in the lobby, I realized how few customers this hotel actually had, and so I invited some friends to help out the business. And by friends, I of course mean skin stealers. I spawned a bunch of them in, and could immediately tell something was wrong. They're all standing at a 45-degree angle for some reason. They still functioned mostly normal, but they were doomed to be crooked forever. I strolled around the map for a bit and found a small group of them desperately trying to get through this door. Which leads me to a question. How many skin stealers does it take to open a door handle? I don't know either, but the answer definitely isn't 5. But that's it for this area, so let's check out the boiler room. During my original playthrough, it felt like this part of the game took me ages. And after zooming out this map, it makes a lot more sense why. From an aerial view, it doesn't look like much, so I meticulously removed each and every piece of the roof, and what you're seeing is the result. From what I counted, there are well over 40 different rooms to search in this area, not including the 3 trap doors containing death moth hives. Heading into the maze itself, we can take a closer look at the female death moth, and they're actually pretty cool looking. They're mostly gray with white stripes, and have what looks like a skull pattern on their back, as well as 2 large set of wings. They'll just sit here swaying back and forth until they spot the player, and we can watch from another perspective as this happens. As soon as they spot the player, they leap off the wall and begin chasing you. The moment they come in contact with the player, instead of jump scaring us, they will actually pick us up. For some reason, this was hilarious to watch in slow motion, as we just flail around while this fun-sized Mothra carries us through the halls. As you can see, the death moths will actually carry you to one of the hives instead of killing you instantly. When we get close, the door will open, and we are dropped inside where we die right away. So while we're here, let's take a closer look at the hive itself. So these hives are actually large, fleshy structures with an assortment of human remains tossed throughout. The walls are covered in what looks like hair. I'm not sure, but it's super gross. Hanging on the ceiling are 3 death moths, who are resting among what looks like entrails, upping the nope factor to previously unachieved levels. So after completing the boiler room, we actually end up back at level 2. Pipe dreams. Only this time we're going to head right instead of left. After walking for what feels like eternity, we are then chased by the Smiler again, and we must head into level fun to escape them. Now in level fun, we must carefully make our way through this children's birthday party without alerting the area's entity, the partygoers. There are a ton of these guys throughout this map, and the only way to get past them is to be completely silent while passing behind them. After reaching the end of this area, we come to a small party room where we find the entrance to the pool rooms. But heading back to the start of this area, let's take a closer look at the partygoers. They're mostly human-like, aside from their yellow skin and mouth lined with large, sharp teeth. Beyond this, their bottom jaw is split in the center, and their long tongues just kinda hang downwards. The partygoers' eyes are straight lines that look to be carved into their heads, resulting in one creepy monster. We can also get an overhead shot to this location, and it's basically a bunch of small rooms with small interconnecting hallways. Although the level is fairly simple and small, it's still incredibly difficult until you figure out the correct path forward. Before moving on, I want to cut out a section of the floor and drop these guys into the void. However, something I didn't realize is that the floor in these rooms is one giant piece of geometry. Meaning, the moment I cut out a piece of floor, everyone, including myself, was sent falling to our demise. Now what's funny is that they actually stay in their positions as they fall. And because of this, it looks like I'm being chased by a group of monstrous skydivers. Glorious! Now heading to the end of this level, there is a door off to the side that is typically inaccessible to the player. If we break it down, we'll find that there's a room behind it and it's fully modeled inside, containing 2 rows of tables with poppable balloons. To my knowledge, this is actually the arcade area from the older version of this game, but if you know for sure, let me know in the comments. Taking a look at the wall on the right hand side of this room, we'll find a rectangular hole, and I believe this used to lead to another hallway, which would then take you to the exit. I'm not sure if this room has any use in the current version of this game, but it's definitely a cool find. But with that, we've come to the end of levels 3 through 6 in Escape the Backrooms. So once we've managed to sneak through level fun, we take a slide that leads us into level 37, Sublimity. also known as the Poolrooms. Once here, our main objective is to explore this maze of water-filled corridors in search of the exit. On this particular map, we can find a hub entrance, as well as a couple of dead ends, and I mean that quite literally. There's a spiraling staircase that leads to a pit of boiling water, and coming in contact with it will immediately kill you. There are also these dark tiled rooms that will slowly kill the player if they remain inside for too long. After exploring a bit, we'll come to a room with a small rectangular pool, and just beyond it is this level's exit. Now heading back to the start of the level, I decide to take the camera around and explore a bit more of this area. If we move the camera up and out of the map, we can see that these little vents near the beginning of the level actually lead outside of the map. Taking a look between the roof of this maze and these small rooms though, we will find this strange empty space in between. The lights outside the map are illuminating the vent holes attached to these small interconnecting halls, resulting in some pretty cool visuals. Zooming a bit further out, we can see that most of the water in this area is actually a large rectangle that spans across the length of the map itself. For the rest of the rooms though, they have individual sections of water beneath them instead of a single large piece. As I mentioned before, there are a few of these rooms that are lined with darker tiles, and the water inside of them is lethal. They're also typically too dark for you to see inside of, even with the use of a flashlight, so viewing them with the lights on is pretty cool. We can also move the player onto the roof of the starting area, as it is in fact walkable ground, and we can explore a little bit too. It's pretty cool seeing the vents from up here, as they each have a bit of steam arising from them, and we can even drop down inside of them if we wanted to. There's not a ton to see here, but before moving on to the next level, it wouldn't feel right spending some time at the pool without a good old-fashioned cannonball. So I run as fast as I can before jumping into the pit of boiling water below, and as you can see, the moment I hit the water's surface, I explode into half a dozen pieces. Glorious! So heading into the next level, Run for Your Life, we find ourselves instead of a hospital with a long corridor in front of us stretching into the distance. The lights are bright red, and there are alarms blaring all around us as well. On the right, there's a smiler behind some closed doors, and although you can't see them, the door on our left is full of partygoers. In this level, our goal is to make it to the end of this hallway as these entities relentlessly pursue us, and we'll have to dodge each obstacle blocking our path along the way. Reaching the doors at the end, we jump into a dark hole, which takes us to the following level called The End. Overall, this level will only last a little over 30 seconds, but there is a lot for us to unpack here. So first and foremost, we can take a look at the entities on this map with the lights on, where we'll find the Smiler is more than just a face in the dark. They're actually the same Smiler we encounter in Pipe Dreams. And if we move the camera out a ways and angle it correctly, we can see their spider-like body. On the opposite side, we'll find 7 partygoers eagerly waiting for those doors to open. These particular entities don't behave like the others we've encountered though, and if we break the doors and enter these little rooms, we'll find that in their present state, they are completely harmless. The Smiler is a solid object, and no jump scare occurs when we touch them. And the partygoers are the same story, except we are able to walk through them. Speaking of the partygoers, when we enter the hallway and trigger the chase to start, we can see that they all just sort of slide out of that little closet. The moment they reach the main hallway though, the running animation will begin. This Smiler, on the other hand, will be forever in its idle pose as it moves down this corridor. And the reason for this is because we never actually see the Smiler itself. We only see its face through a veil of darkness that moves with this herd of enemies. If I move the camera back, you can see that this shadowy barrier is really a black cube that is placed around the Smiler, and it is moved with them throughout this chase sequence. Something you usually can't see because of how fast this chase scene plays out is how the party goer enters this small hallway to follow the player. If we move the camera into that main corridor, we will see that they just sort of slide away from the rest of the group, and upon reaching the door at the end, they'll slide back into the group again. But now let's try to break some stuff. So first and foremost, as you may have guessed, I was curious if we would be able to delete some of the floor and send these monsters plummeting to their doom. Sometimes it doesn't work, so it's a good test. So I made a couple of holes in the floor, and upon activating the chase, they'll walk right over these holes like they aren't even there. The reason this happens is because, similar to the Smiler chase in Pipe Dreams, they aren't technically chasing the player at all. They're actually programmed so that when activated by the player, they'll follow a set path, which just happens to be the direction the player is moving in. This can be demonstrated by teleporting the player behind the monsters after they have begun moving. As you can see, we're now directly behind them, and they couldn't care less. They're still trekking towards the end of the hallway, and will do so until they reach the end. Once they reach the end of this hall, the map will be reloaded after a brief delay, and will be sent to the beginning again. I believe this is a failsafe that is put here to prevent the player from glitching behind the monsters and breaking this chase sequence entirely. Now, while I was messing with the game a bit, I realized something strange had taken place. For some reason, when I began walking through the level, the monsters, didn't activate? So I was free to explore this area without being chased, and it's definitely a bit strange considering you're usually only here for less than a minute. While climbing over this mess of furniture though, I managed to get stuck on a medical cart and couldn't break free. And because of this, the game sound got super glitchy. Have a listen. At the end of the hallway, we can take a look at the hole we're meant to jump into, and because the lights are on, we can actually see the bottom. What I find pretty interesting though, is that if we jump into it at this point, we will simply hit the ground and nothing happens. So I have to restart the level. Finally, before heading into the next level, I decided to shrink the player down and see if we could complete this chase. As the sequence begins, I am running for my life. And what's really funny is that because we're so small, we're actually able to fit underneath some of the furniture, meaning we don't even have to go around it. And after an adrenaline-pumping chase, we reach the door and load into the next level. So in the level The End, you load into a mostly empty library that is lined with wooden shelves. This area's entity immediately makes his presence known as it wanders blindly in search of the player. In order to complete this level, you have to turn the computer on at the front desk, and then collect some VHS tapes that are scattered throughout this location, all while sneaking quietly and utilizing fire alarms to evade the Scratcher. Once you've collected all the tapes, the Scratcher will despawn, and a portal will appear that takes us to the following level. Restarting the level, we can take a closer look at this level's entity, and they're definitely pretty menacing. Their body is a grayish color, and they have long, lanky limbs extending from their elongated torso. They are made even creepier by their glowing red eyes and lack of a mouth. It's pretty unsettling watching them move, as their body constantly shakes and contorts with each step. Taking a look outside the map, there are a couple of interesting things to check out, including these two squares floating in the void. Now, the square on the right is present in every level, and it is used for the recording overlay that can be turned on in the settings. However, now there is a second square, and this one contains the number that appears on the computer screen as we collect those tapes. But something even more interesting is that just outside the map itself is a small cube with some stairs in it. This is a section of the following level, the Escherian Stairwell, and at first I wasn't sure why this was placed out here. It turns out, when we collect all of the VHS tapes, we can see a distorted view of the stairwell within the portal itself. And upon further inspection, this is a live view of the map component that is stored out of bounds. We can actually warp the player over here, as it does have collision, and walk around freely. It's a bit funny though because this asset is scaled up quite a bit, so we look way too small inside of it. Since this area is being viewed through that portal, we can move the camera back inside the map and see ourselves inside of it. And it's pretty hilarious watching the player run around like this. Before moving on, we can watch what happens when the Scratcher is despawned. And the moment we interact with the computer, after collecting all the tapes, they will quickly rise up through the ceiling and unload. So upon entering the Escherian Stairwell, we find ourselves on the first floor of this massive spiraling staircase. Our goal is to continue climbing upwards until we reach a floor that is labeled 94, where we will then jump down the center of the staircase, leading us to the next level. This location is pretty simple, and there are no entities present to worry about, but I was really curious how this map worked behind the scenes. So if we move the camera out of bounds, we'll see that the map itself is a large tower floating in the void. The stairwell itself starts off at 11 floors tall, and with each floor you climb, we can see that the tower expands upward by another section. This will supposedly continue infinitely, with each floor beyond the 99th being loaded in with an infinity symbol. Something I found pretty cool is that if we teleport the player directly to the top of the tower, we can walk around up here without the next floor loading in. However, if we drop down into the staircase and then take a look up above, we'll see that even more floors have loaded in separately from the rest. To my understanding, the way this works is that each section loads in 10 floors above you. That way, you'll never be able to see this process occurring. Now, after reaching the room labeled 94, we can move the camera all the way back down to the bottom, where we'll find a large hole now occupying the center. If the player drops into the center of the staircase, they will begin an unstoppable freefall animation leading them into the void, where they will enter the next level. As this sequence plays out, the player's body will unload, and only our arms will be visible until we enter the next level. That's all there is to check out on this map, so let's continue on to level 94, Motion. This map is a massive landscape full of lush green hills, winding roads, and houses scattered throughout. Your goal is to make it through this expansive location in order to ultimately end up inside the floating castle on the far side. This particular location utilizes a day/night cycle, and if you're outside after dark, you risk being killed by the animations. These are small, puppet-like entities that will pursue the player if spotted after sunset, and they'll even chase you indoors if the lights are not shut off, meaning the only real safe space is inside of a closet or under a bed. Throughout this map, you can also find a handful of trucks that, when entered, will take you closer to the castle, saving you a fair bit of time. Upon reaching the castle, we climb up a rope and end up inside of what looks like a funhouse of sorts. We solve a puzzle here, and then enter a larger, mall-like area with a roller coaster, where we will find the animated king, this level's boss. He will attempt to attack you from all directions, and you must look directly at him in order to prevent him from reaching you. After surviving 100 seconds, the roller coaster will be ready, and we can escape by riding it into the next level. Rewinding time, the first thing I wanted to do was get an aerial shot of this entire map. And man, it is huge. It's kinda crazy because when we're zoomed this far out, the houses look like tiny specks, and we can't even see the player. Moving the camera to the end of the level, I was curious what the castle looked like up close. And as you can see, it is completely empty inside, except for this large black cube floating just above the floor. While I was over here, I tried teleporting the player inside, but we're only able to stay on the top of the castle, and the collision mesh doesn't line up exactly, so we're just kinda hovering above it. So after night falls, if you leave the lights on in the house you're currently hiding in, the animations will break in through the front door. If we move the camera outside the closet while we're hiding, we can get a good look at them too. As you can see, they are childlike wooden puppets that look to be wearing Boy Scout uniforms, and they'll just sort of stare out of the window until the sun comes up. We can also see that with the lighting effects turned off, their eyes do not glow red, but instead look mostly human. The moment the sun comes up, they will immediately run out of the house and into the distance before unloading. We can also take a look from another perspective at their jump scare, and it's pretty funny looking. They'll take a step back before lunging into the air like a professional wrestler and clobbering us on the head. And as if things couldn't get any worse, they begin A-posing on us to assert dominance. Not cool, man. Now when night falls, there are only so many places to hide. But while messing around with the game, I may have found another way to escape these terrifying entities. Typically, the trucks close their doors at night, so if you don't reach them in time, you're pretty much out of luck. That is, until I found out you can access them even if their doors are closed. So by crouching at the front of these trucks, you can actually clip through the front bumper and into the engine bay. And by standing up and walking forward, you can end up in the cab. Now what's interesting is that the trigger to start moving the truck can also be hit from inside the cab, meaning we can still hitch a ride from this typically inaccessible spot. Even after nightfall, the entities are incapable of entering the truck, and we don't have to worry about the doors opening, meaning we are completely safe to enjoy the trucker life as long as we'd like. Now jumping ahead, when we enter the castle we climb this giant rope, and this is what that looks like from a different angle. Once inside the castle, we can take a look at Abounds, where we'll see that this carnival area exists within a large, rusty blue dome. I'm not sure what it's used for, but there's also a white square just outside the map itself. If you know what this is used for, let me know in the comments. Now, if we break the door before the puzzle is solved, we can actually explore this open area without activating the boss fight. There really isn't a whole lot to see here, but I do want to check out the animated king boss fight. So when the animated king spawns in to attack the player, they just kind of load in somewhere in the map and begin running towards us. We can watch in bullet time what happens when they fade away, and it looks like the dude got Thanos snapped. He fades away into small particles before reappearing elsewhere. Finally, when we access the roller coaster, you can see that a separate model loads in to play out this animation, and I was curious what happens if we delete the roller coaster itself. And after doing so, we just kinda crazy frog it and stop moving. After defeating the animated king and riding the roller coaster to freedom, we arrive at level 6, Lights Out. Once here, we make our way through a couple of dark hallways before catching a peek at this level's entity, the Wretch. Just ahead, we arrive at a room containing a handful of helpful resources, including 4 LiDAR scanners. This tool has a couple of useful features, including a radar that detects nearby entities, as well as a light projector that emits colorful particles onto the pitch black walls of this maze. Unfortunately, flashlights are of no use here, so our only method of escape is to map out the walls with these particles while also trying to avoid being caught by the Wretch. Eventually, we arrive at a bright hallway and go through a door, leading us to the next section of the game, heading back to the start of this horrific labyrinth, we can see that the roller coaster we rode in on is still up on the tracks behind us. This entrance area extends slightly outwards before coming to an end, and the back wall is hidden by this shadowy block. And speaking of darkness, if we take a look at the no flashlight zone with everything brightened up, well, it's still dark. Unlike the other dark areas in this game, all the walls in this particular maze are completely black and cannot be lit up by other light sources. However, if we add a light source beneath the map to illuminate this labyrinth, we'll be able to see the insides of these hallways with the help of environmental fog. Although everything within this area is still pitch black, we will be able to see the silhouettes of various pieces of furniture as we look around, including this, floating cabinet? I'm not sure why this is here, but it probably went unnoticed due to the lack of visibility in this area. As for the dots created by the LiDAR scanner, they appear to be solid colored decals that are projected onto the walls, and a blooming effect is applied to them, which results in this cool visual appearance. Now, heading out of bounds, there is a large gray plane above this maze, meaning we can see the entire layout of this level from down below. This is a pretty large maze, considering we must traverse it mostly blind, and can only map a path forward using the particles we project on the walls. Now, typically on this map, we cannot see the wretch itself beyond their jump scare animation. We can really only see their silhouettes as they walk in front of the LiDAR scanner's particles. But with the post-processing effects turned off, they are plainly visible, giving us the opportunity to look at them a bit closer. They're mostly humanoid in appearance, although they seem to be missing their skin and have unusually sharp canine teeth. Observing their jump scare from a different perspective, we can see that they lean back, pose like they're on a super dope album cover, and then explode the player a moment later. With the lighting effects turned on, we can see that a light is projected onto them as this animation starts, resulting in a pretty frightening jump scare. We will of course be messing with the wretch a bit later in the video, but for now let's continue onward to the following level. After navigating this maze, we arrive at level 7, Thalassophobia. In this level, we find ourselves in a flooded house that appears to be floating atop a massive body of water. There are a bunch of other houses in the distance, and we can travel to them using this small wooden boat. Our goal in this location is to row our way through the fog, searching these homes for supplies, and eventually coming across a lighthouse near one of the homes. We put on a diving helmet and then drop into the water using a shark cage. Now, this cage is made to protect against sharks, and not whatever the heck that thing is. But we're lucky enough to drop beneath them just in time. From here, we're meant to swim out of the cage and into the cave system, where we will arrive at the next location. So after restarting the level, I decided to get an aerial shot of this massive ocean, and that doesn't even begin to describe it. Zooming all the way out, we can see that the sky and clouds are textured on the inside of this giant sky dome. And by the time we reach the walls of this dome, the houses we usually explore look like a few grains of rice at this distance. Taking it a step further, we can fly beyond the walls and get a good look at this dome from the outside. Playing through this map, you would never guess that the entirety of level 7 takes place in one half of the Death Star. But hey, the more you know! Heading back inside the map, we can see there is a distinct dark square surrounding the player, and to my knowledge, this is actually used for when the player dips below the water's surface. As you can see, when we move the camera underwater, it appears as though we're actually underwater, and everything has this sort of hazy appearance. Moving beyond this cube, we can take a look beneath the surface once again, where we will be able to see into the void. Looking around beneath the water's surface, we can see the rest of the houses are fully modeled, and extend downwards where we typically can't see. Now heading over to the shark cage, where we begin our aquatic voyage, we can throw on the diving helmet, and viewing this from another angle is honestly hilarious. As soon as we pick one up, it appears in our hands, and as we place it on our head, it becomes several times larger. I mean, this thing is nearly half our size, and it's giving me some serious BioShock vibes. This is done so that, to the player, it appears as though we're looking through the inside of the helmet, and we typically never know it was this gigantic. Now, we usually can't see this occurring because the screen goes black, but as soon as we dip below the water's surface, the rest of the map's assets will unload, and the undersea portion will then appear beneath us. Of course, this is when the thing on level 7 appears and tries to eat us, and I'm sure a ton of you are curious what the rest of this creature looks like. As you can see, this massive creature is actually an anglerfish, and although the drawing at the start of the level depicts them as being more serpent-like, their tail is actually comically small compared to what I was expecting. Their mouth is lined with long, sharp teeth though, and they are incredibly menacing given their gargantuan stature. As we drop beneath them, they'll close their mouth and swim above us before ultimately unloading. Before moving on, while looking through the game files, I stumbled across an older, incomplete version of this map. as you can see, is a lot smaller than the completed level, and there are only a handful of houses scattered throughout. There isn't much to this area at this point, but what I found pretty funny is if we delete the boat blocking the door, then we can just walk around on top of the water. There's also a floating door just off to the right that can be opened and closed, but not much else. That's not the only thing I found in the game files though, because I also managed to find the original thing on level 7 entity, and spawning it in, we can take a quick look at it. It's a bit more accurate to the drawing at the start of the level, as it has a long eel-like body, glowing blue eyes, and several fins extending from its torso. I'm not sure why this model wasn't used, because it's actually pretty awesome. That's it for Thalassophobia though, so let's take a quick look at level 8, the cave system. After surfacing inside this damp cavern, we grab some supplies and then head through this chamber that blasts us with bug spray. Spoiler alert, it's for good reason, as this initial cave section is filled with female death moths. You have to sneak carefully in order to avoid alerting these monstrous insects as you progress further into the caves. Eventually you come to a rickety bridge that will collapse if you're not careful, and then you head into another bug spray chamber. Now our goal is to avoid the patrolling skin stealers during our search for the exit, and as we enter the small passageway, we will come to a bottomless ravine. Before we can reach the other side, we will have to take a detour by climbing this ladder, leading us to level 0.11. First off, this map is pretty large, and I wasn't expecting it to all be on one singular map. My assumption was that by passing through those bug spray chambers, we would load in the next section of the level and unload the one behind us. However, upon closer inspection, we can see that these doors can actually be deleted, and we can continue on as normal. Jumping ahead to the hole that we crossed in the first section, we can see that at the bottom of this gaping pit is a large piece of black geometry. If you try sprinting across the bridge, it will snap directly in the center, and you will die the moment you touch that black death barrier. But I'm not done with this bridge just yet. So while investigating this area, I learned that if you stop time like Dio, and then start it again, there's a chance that this bridge will, get violent. That's the only way I can describe it. Each of the boards that stretch across this gap are glitching around at an insane speed. Of course, my first thought was to see what happens if we touch it, and much to my surprise, nothing happened. The bridge simply resets back to its regular position, and even splits in half when we sprint across it. But I'm not quite satisfied yet, so I place a character next to the bridge and begin messing with the game's speed. And the instant the bridge begins glitching out, we're sent flying backwards. What's crazy is that we were hit hard enough by these boards to glitch into the floor, and when walking forward, we drop down out of bounds. But that's not the craziest part, because when we fell through the level, all of this map's entities fell with us. Yes, all the death moths and skin stealers were thrown into the eternal darkness alongside the player. That's how strong this thing is. The monsters in this level are dangerous, but this bridge is without a doubt the scariest entity here, man. And because the third time's a charm, I make one last attempt at crossing, only to be spiked into the void like a volleyball. Yikes. Now at the end of this level, we are typically unable to cross this gap due to an invisible barrier. But if we teleport the player to the other side, we can completely skip ahead to level 9. But before doing so, let's take a peek at level 0.11. So after climbing the ladder, we arrive at a map that's similar in appearance to level 0. And heading forward, we arrive at a small section of what I believe is level 0.2. Here, we must use a set of lights to obtain a code used for a locker. And, for some reason, the number sections of the wall didn't load in. They were replaced by this tiled texture instead, which made it a bit more difficult to decipher. We then open this locker and use said code to obtain a chainsaw, which is used to move onward, where we clip into level 0.11, water damage. Here we navigate a maze similar to level 0, and then pull some levers to open a gate on the far side of the map. Of course, we're not alone, as bacteria, also known as the Howler in this game, will be patrolling the halls in search of the player. After opening the gate, we pass through level 188, where we use the lit up windows to obtain a code used for the door. Here we take an elevator back to the cave system, where we can then enter level 9, the Darkened Suburbs. So rewinding time, we can see the area we load into after climbing the ladder is actually attached to level 0. The rest of the map is loaded in, and this small section is simply added onto it, although the entrance is blocked by a vent cover that can only be destroyed using a crowbar. Now if we head into the room we accessed using the chainsaw, we can see that the hallways don't actually lead anywhere and are obscured by these dark squares. We can also watch from another angle what happens when we no-clip into the next section of this level. As you can see, the moment this is triggered, the player's model unloads and the next level loads in. Moving the camera out of bounds, we can see bacteria is once again stored in a box out of bounds, although this is not the same entity we encountered previously. As you can see, when this bacteria is moved into the map, they will patrol these hallways indefinitely instead of teleporting around the player's location. So something you may notice is that when looking at the map from an aerial view, level 188 is not currently present. Even if we teleport the player beyond the steel gate at the end, the door can be opened, but it does not lead anywhere since this portion of the level is not yet loaded in. It's a bit hard to see, but the moment we pull the 4th lever, this area will load in behind that door. Although, there is a black border around it, which is why you cannot see it. We can delete these black rectangles though, and view things from out of bounds. Though they appear to be modeled inside, only a couple of these windows lead to an actual room. We can stand inside of them as they do contain walkable ground, but looking at these other rooms, well, they don't actually exist. They're just projections that are overlaid on top of the window itself, and they move with the camera's position to simulate a 3D space. This is typically done so that the developer does not have to fully model a room that the player would usually never be able to access. That's pretty much everything of interest I found here, so let's jump ahead to level 9, the Darkened Suburbs. So we load in on the sidewalk of a foggy suburb in the dead of night, and after exploring a bit, you come to the entrance of the abandoned outpost. From here, your goal is to enter the homes that are highlighted on the screen and activate the security terminals that are inside. Some of these houses are guarded by a wretch, and you have to evade them in order to complete your objective. You're not safe on the outside either though, since the neighborhood watch is roaming the streets and will pursue the player if spotted. After activating all 3 security terminals, you return to the outpost where you can now enter the facility. Once inside, your objective is to locate 4 bottles of almond concentrate, while avoiding the wretch that is roaming these corridors, and then insert the bottles into a chemical shower. You must then lure the wretch onto a pressure plate, where they'll be trapped inside of a cage, and then using the chemical shower, you turn them back into a human. After collecting the ID card from their neck, you can return to the suburbs and continue on to the following level. So, rewinding time, I immediately turn the lights on, which makes this area a lot less spooky. We can take a good look at the neighborhood watch now, and all their disgusting features. They are a massive eyeball monster that looks to be covered in blood, and instead of feet, they have 4 hands that extend from the bottom of their head. Heading into one of the houses, I also wanted to take a look at the wretch. As you can see, this is not the same entity we encountered in level 6. Although they are mostly the same in appearance, these particular versions are carrying a crowbar instead of walking around empty-handed. Because of this, their jump scare is different as well. And as you can see, they violently swing the crowbar at us before we explode into tiny pieces. They're still horrible to look at though. While playing through this level, I realized that it's actually pretty easy to break the neighborhood watch. So if you get their attention and they begin chasing you, and then you run up onto a porch, they can actually soft lock themselves as they try returning to their normal pathing. If done correctly, they'll just endlessly run into the wall until they locate the player again, meaning if we're careful, we can avoid having to deal with them at all. Soft locking them wasn't enough for me though, so I decided to face them head on. Only to make things more fair, I made the player absolutely massive. When they came in contact with my player controller, the jumpscare animation started, resulting in them looking right up at me. When we actually died, for some reason our torso flew way up into the sky, and the monster just walked away, still leaning backwards. Heading onward to the abandoned outpost, we can view this map from an aerial perspective, where we'll find that the section resembling level 0 is actually the largest section of this level. It's a bit odd considering we can't usually access this area during normal gameplay. But by breaking down the wall, we can walk around in here and explore a bit. It's mostly empty inside, but what I found rather interesting is that the wretch is incapable of entering this area. Even if they're chasing us down, they will stop the moment we enter this location. While I was in here, I also found that this out-of-bounds area extends further than we can typically see. And by going around the corner, we can walk around on these sections of the floor that extend beyond the walls. Some of these walls are transparent from the outside, and what's kinda cool is that we can walk up to the lockers and hide inside of them, even though they're within the map and we are standing out of bounds. Now, when we trap the wretch inside the cage, they are typically hidden by the particle effects when the chemical shower is activated. But when we move the camera inside the mist, we can watch them change instantaneously from a wretch back into a human. Something else I was curious about is what happens if the player comes in contact with a wretch when they are locked in the cage. So I spawned a wretch on top of the pressure plate and locked myself inside with them, but no jump scare occurred. We can safely move around in here, although it is a bit claustrophobic. Attempting to delete the cage surrounding them results in the entire contraption being removed, including the wretch inside. That's it for this level though, so let's head into level 10, the bumper crop. So immediately after loading in, we find ourselves on a long stretch of road between 2 wheat fields. And as we venture onward, we must be careful not to be snuck up on by the facelings, this level's entity. They'll continue to approach us from either side, and will only leave if spotted by the player. After reaching the barn at the end of this road, we will then have to walk through several long stretches of this dense field, following the lights on the windmills and turning them on as we go. We're not in the clear yet though, because facelings, wielding chainsaws, will begin hunting us down through these crops. Eventually we come to a large parking lot that leads us to level 3999, the true ending, where upon entering this arcade area and walking down a hallway, we reach what was once the old ending of Escape the Backrooms before additional levels rolled out. Now jumping back a bit, we can take a look at this massive farmland from an aerial perspective, and it's definitely one of the bigger maps in this entire game. The wheat fields we travel through to reach the arcade are lined with various sized fence-off sections, and from up here you can see exactly how this area is laid out. It's really not that difficult of a maze, but the wheat and chainsaw-wielding monsters definitely make it a bit harder. Something else I wanted to check out was this blocked off section near the barn, and where it potentially leads. We can see that behind these logs there is a hidden pathway, but we are unable to reach it under normal circumstances. If we delete these logs though, we can freely walk beyond it and explore this out of bounds area. The path leads to yet another roadblock, and beyond it is a small section of road that leads into the void. There are no entities over here, and we can freely wander as much as we want. Now, something I was curious about is how the facelings behave off camera when they come from those fields. And moving the camera above the player, we can see that as we make our way down this road, they'll begin loading in just out of sight. After turning to face them, they will just walk out of sight before unloading again. Similarly, we can see that the chainsaw faceling also just sort of appears as we pass that first windmill, and will then begin chasing the player. Speaking of the chainsaw faceling, we can watch their jump scare from a different angle, and it's pretty funny. The moment this jump scare occurs, the player's model unloads, and then they sort of just cut into the air slowly. As if killing us wasn't enough, they then A-pose on us to assert dominance. I get that you're a remorseless killer entity and all, but that's just unnecessary, man. Finally, we can take a look at level 3999, which was at one point the final level in Escape the Backrooms. And from outside the map, we can see how this level is actually put together. There's a large checkered floor that extends outside this main lobby area, as well as the hub entrance just off to the left side. We can also see this expansive hallway that lights up in the final cutscene, but I was curious what exactly was down those halls. Teleporting the player beyond the trigger for said cutscene means we can explore this area unhindered, and it's actually pretty cool walking around back here. This main hall itself comes to an end, and there's nothing back here but some more empty hallways. So because the game no longer ends here, this arcade area has been updated a little bit. Instead of a long, dead-end hallway, there is now a small area at the end where an elevator can be found. When viewed from an outside perspective, we can compare this level to its previous version and see just how much of it has changed. In order to move on from this location, we'll have to grab a ticket and punch the printed numbers into the elevator, thus leading us to level 0.2, Remodeled Mess. Once here, we have to find a way to reach the elevator in front of us. There's just one issue though. There is a huge entity known as the Bone Thief in the tunnel beside us, and it will eat us alive if we try to pass through. But heading down this hallway, we'll find a large maze and several locked doors. And in order to progress, we'll have to jump through these no-clipping floors and into level 0.1, the danger zone. These sub-levels are pretty similar, and when opening a door in the danger zone, it will then be unlocked up above. We then head back through the no-clipping floors and power on the electrical boxes, as this can't be done down below. The danger zone is inhabited by a skin stealer and several smilers, so you'll have to be alert when down here. After all 5 boxes are powered, we can shut the gate and bypass the Bone Thief. Let's rewind time now though, and have another look at this location. Now the very first thing I wanted to investigate was the no-clipping floors themselves. From the player's perspective, they're almost staticky in appearance, but this effect is a bit more interesting than you'd first realize. We can see that they don't directly lead anywhere, as there's nothing connected to them and they lead directly out of bounds. When slowing the game down, we can see that the static effect is pulled off in a pretty clever way. In bullet time, you'll see that there are what look like several different textures placed here that move in different directions. And the static appearance is a result of this Z-fighting taking place with these materials. Essentially, there are multiple surfaces trying to occupy the same location, and as a result, they will flicker endlessly. This is of course visually enhanced by the textures themselves moving opposite to one another. When viewing this map from a different angle, we can see that level 0.1 is placed a short distance beneath 0.2. There are a couple differences between them, including a few walls and some hallways, but besides this, they're actually quite similar. When the player steps into one of the no-clipping floors, they'll fall through the map before instantly warping to the corresponding location down below. Next, something I was curious about is this taped off section in the main lobby area. It appears to be the same as the other no-clipping floors, but it's blocked off so we can't walk onto it. We can manually delete this caution tape though, and in doing so we'll find that it's purely cosmetic, and we'll walk over top of it normally. Speaking of taped off areas, there's a section of what looks like level 0 just off to the side, and we can't typically access it. Moving the camera inside, you can see that it's fully modeled in here, but it simply comes to a wall on the other side. Now I'm sure you're all curious about the Bone Thief and exactly how they work off camera. So the moment you cross into their sight line, they'll immediately lunge out and grab you. This looks a bit silly when viewed from a different angle. As we can see, they'll just slide across the floor in the direction of the player. They have these stubby little legs and a massive mouth, and they're almost whale-like in appearance. In bullet time, this jump scare is especially freaky, as we can clearly see the eyes hidden deep within their jaws. If we clip the camera through their model, we can see the rest of their eyeballs inside of their model as well. As they swallow the player, our death model will be instantly warped elsewhere. Its mouth opens up again, and their eyes become wide as they slink out of view. Brightening up this area, we can find the player's corpse in this monster's idle location, as well as getting a good look at this normally unseen location. Before moving on, I wanted to know if it were possible to outrun the Bone Thief. So I walked into their line of sight to trigger the attack, and then warped the player all the way across the map. This did not detour the beast though, and it clipped through all the walls and headed straight for me. We were then swallowed up and taken all the way back to the tunnel. That's it for this level though, so let's jump into the elevator and continue onward. So immediately after taking the elevator, we arrive at level 6.1, the Snackrooms. This area functions as sort of an intermission and a place to restock on supplies for what follows. There's not much to recap here, as we simply type a code into a typewriter to unlock the door, but I felt it was necessary to mention. The only thing we can see off camera here is the elevator, which is seen dropping down out of sight, where it freezes in place after passing through this shadowy barrier. Back inside the map, we head through the exit, which brings us to the next level, the hotel chase. As we head into this gargantuan maze of a hotel, our path is blocked by these metal gates. We step on the world's heaviest doormat to open up one of the paths, which leads us to a lever on the wall. As we reach it, a clump will spawn in and begin chasing the player through the hallways. From here, we must navigate this area in search of an exit, all the while avoiding the barrage of obstacles along the way. After reaching a safe spot and finding a chainsaw, we use it to open a door, where the second half of the chase begins. Throughout this level, there are several dead ends occupied by smilers, so it's imperative that we make as few mistakes as possible. After reaching the blue room at the end, we will arrive at the entrance to the following level. Restarting the hotel chase, we can have a look at this entire map and see just how many twists and turns we're truly dealing with. There are several dead ends within this area, and only a couple of places where we can catch our breath. In the very first hallway, there's the pressure plate that we use to open the door, and just beyond it, we can see that the floor extends out of bounds a short way. Something else you'll notice is that most of the doors we run past do not lead anywhere either. However, they are blocked by these shadowy boxes, so we cannot see anything past them when they open. On the other end of this entrance area, we'll find the shadowy hallway that the clump begins chasing us from. It turns out that they're already loaded in just beyond this black barrier, and when the game is unpaused, we can see that their animations are already active as well. They're pretty creepy looking though, with a dozen or so hands extending from their body and a mouth full of giant teeth. It's hard to get a good look at them when they're chasing you, and I'm starting to think that's probably for the best. Now, as the player enters this hallway and approaches the lever, the trigger will be hit and the clump begins relentlessly chasing the player. As they draw near, we can have a look at their jump scare animation in bullet time. As this occurs, we can see that they simply pick the player up and then shove them into their mouth. As I'm sure you're aware, the player then explodes as usual. After giving chase, we eventually come to the first blue room, which is an area the clump cannot access. From here, the clump passes us by and heads into the side hallway. And following them with the camera reveals a couple of things. For starters, they'll simply stop moving after passing through the black barrier, where they'll remain dormant indefinitely. I also found a smiler here as well, and there's a reason for this. When entering the wrong hallway, a smiler will lunge out of the darkness and chase us in the opposite direction, pushing us directly into the clump. These smilers are actually present in several hallways here, and they all serve the same purpose, preventing you from going the wrong way. I would have preferred a wrong way sign, but you do you, game. Moving the camera to the following hallway, we can head to the end where a separate clump can be found already loaded in. I had assumed that the previous entity would be moved to this hallway, but it turns out there's more than one clump present in this map at any given time. With this clump, however, I wanted to test a theory. What would happen if we managed to get behind them in this tiny hallway? When warping the player behind them, they'll simply turn around and chase us into their spawn location. I had assumed this entity would work like the Smilers on Pipe Dreams, but these creatures are not limited to a set path. Wherever the player goes, an ever-changing path is generated that leads the clump to our location. But due to this, we can break them in a pretty funny way. As we enter this lobby area, we can jump onto several couches, making it impossible for an enemy to reach us. If we stand on the center platform, they can still get to us, but these couches tell the clump's AI that we are completely inaccessible. Probably because the couch's collider interferes with the navigational mesh of the monster. I find it incredibly funny that a simple piece of furniture can break such a monstrous creature. If the player is warped onto the balcony, the same thing will take place. The clump continues on to the end of the level, as though we've already reached safety. That's it for the hotel chase, so let's continue on to level 188, the Courtyard of Windows. As we head into this larger hotel lobby, there's a massive open area lined with windows that we must gain access to. To do so, 3 TV sets must be found and placed in the correct spots in front of these windows. To locate them, we'll have to take the elevator up a floor and begin searching the dozens of hotel rooms and their bathrooms. We'll face 2 lethal entities on this map as well, including the Aranea membri, a massive spider-like entity that will chase us when spotted. In each hotel room, there's also a chance that a window entity will appear in the, window. It's a humanoid entity with glowing eyes and elongated claws that will snatch us up if we get too close. After each TV is in its proper place, the door will open and we can jump down into this hole, leading us to the next level. Rewinding time, there are a few things we can check out about the map itself. There is nothing beneath the pit we jump into, and it simply leads into the void. Aside from this, there are 2 other sections to this map, including a hub entrance and a door that we can't typically access. We're usually stopped by this level's entity, so we can't see inside, but moving the camera, we'll find that there's nothing in here anyway. We'll be coming back here in a little bit, but for now let's take a look at the other floor. As we head into the elevator, we can watch from the outside as it begins rising and the first floor unloads. When reaching the top, this next section will be loaded in before the door opens, making it appear as a seamless transition. While having a look around, the first thing you'll notice is that the windows here are the same as the smaller version of level 188. They're not physical rooms, but instead flat projections that change in appearance based on the camera's position. Among these false windows are a small office with red lighting, an empty office space with a sign that says "Register Now" on the window, a cozy looking bedroom, and finally what I believe is a conference room. On this floor, we can have a closer look at the Aranea membri, as it's already begun trekking the halls. It's a jet black, spider-like creature with what looks like an animal skull for a head. It roams the hallways in search of the player, and they definitely don't make it easy moving these giant TV sets around. As I said earlier, this isn't the only entity present on this map either, as the window entities can spawn in whenever we enter a hotel room. Typically, we can only see their silhouette and their eyes, since we can't exactly get a closer look without dying. Here, I move the camera outside the window before activating their trigger, and we can see that they'll load in just below the player's view as a black box begins fading in around them. Up close, we can see that their skin is extremely scaly, and their eyes also have a similar appearance, making them look almost like the eyes of a bug. Their mouth almost looks like it's stitched closed, with all this resulting in one creepy entity. We can also view their jump scare from a different perspective, and in bolt time, we'll see that the window shatters instantly. They'll snap into this reaching animation where they put their hands around the player's neck, and after we blow up into little pieces, this creature will return to their idle pose and slink back down out of sight before unloading. In summary, they'll break the window to strangle us, refuse to elaborate, and then float away. Glorious! Now, back on the first floor, when the player attempts to enter this glowing room, the Aranea membri will drop down from a vent and chase us into the giant pit. From another angle, we can see that this entity just blinks into existence, clipping through this T-shaped vent. They then directly pursue the player, and here, we can also have a look at their jump scare. They draw back before chomping at us, and after we've died, they'll walk on top of our body and do the spider equivalent of T-posing. So after taking a leap of faith into this giant, seemingly bottomless pit, we land in the entrance to level 37.2. This is an enormous version of the Poolrooms area we've explored previously, but here we'll face a lot more dangers. As we enter this area, we'll find a pool infected by Hydrolytis plague, a bacteria that slowly kills whoever comes in contact with it. Our goal here is to hop into a raft and reach the end of the level, but it's a bit more difficult than that. There are several blockades that we need to bypass, and how we do this varies for each step. Most notably, we enter these dark pool room areas to open several valves, and we'll have to avoid the clumps patrolling each location as we do so. Reaching the end of the waterway, we'll climb a staircase before choosing a slide to enter, bringing this level to a close. Now, rewinding time, we can have a better look at this massive waterlogged area. The very first thing I wanted to check out though is the water infected by the hydrolytis plague, because for obvious reasons, we can't get too close during regular gameplay. The bacteria-infected water is a bit darker in appearance, and when viewed up close, we can see this green, cloudy substance inside. We can also see the bacteria itself morphing inside, reshaping as it appears and disappears throughout. So after heading down this massive slide, I had discovered that when pausing and unpausing the game, my raft would bounce straight up out of the water. I wasn't able to skip the blockades this way, but it was definitely funny to see. Before entering the first of the dark pool rooms, I teleported the raft out of the water, but I was unfortunately unable to move it up here. So I abandoned the raft and continued onward. To explain a bit further, when we're inside these dark pool room areas, we must fill these small tanks using the valves placed throughout the level. It's pretty easy to get turned around here, which is not a good thing, considering a clump is roaming around in search of the player. Unlike the hotel chase, the clumps here don't need to be activated. They're already patrolling from the moment we load in. Usually we can jump across the pool to avoid them, but that makes things a little too easy. So, to make things a little more exciting, I decided to spawn in almost a dozen more. I was expecting them to scatter throughout the map, but they all surprisingly clumped together. It didn't take long for them to get stuck, and after gaining their attention, they broke free from their stun lock and began chasing me. In hindsight, diving into the pool was probably not the best idea, as I quickly became surrounded. At this point, I had to wait for them to move elsewhere, and most of them did, but a couple stayed behind to wait for me. I finally found an opening and used it to get to safety, but I immediately ran into a clump, killing me instantly. Now, after opening each valve, I returned to the raft, where I came to the giant hole. I wasn't ready to face another clump though, so I just warped across without activating the valves, which saved me a lot of time. Here we come to yet another blockade, this time requiring us to drain the water instead of raising it. I decided side quests are for nerds though, and destroy the barrier instead, but that's when something interesting happened. For some reason, gravity chose not to exist, and our emergency raft became an improvised flying machine. None of the level's barriers meant anything new, because we simply flew right over top of them, including the bacteria-infected waters. When jumping out of the boat though, gravity kicked back in, and we dropped down to the floor below. I wasn't finished with my invention yet though, so I got back on and began deleting the walls in my way. Unfortunately, the collider for the raft had broken somehow, and we can no longer get inside. Collateral damage is expected when hacking the backrooms though, and I accidentally broke some of the walls in this final room, as well as the staircase we need to leave. Before heading into the next level, we can have a look at these slides as well, and we'll see that they just end up outside the map. That's it for the expanded pool rooms though, so let's take the slide into the subsequent area, Level Fun Plus. The slides will drop us off into the ball pit of this eerie party hall, and just ahead we'll find a room with 5 hallways. There's a giant gate in front that must be unlocked using an arcade game, and we must collect 4 keys from the surrounding areas. Again, this is a pretty lengthy part of the game with too much to recap immediately, so we'll cover each area as we go. Heading down the blue hallway, we'll arrive at a huge room occupied by tables and balloons, as well as a big dining area in the center. To obtain this area's key, we'll carefully traverse this location and pop balloons, as this is where the key is hidden. There are tons of areas to check, and there are multiple partygoers patrolling the area, so we'll have to be careful. From an aerial view, we can get a good look at this area's layout. There are a handful of walls and cubbies where tables containing balloons can be found, but there isn't a whole lot for us to check out here. So, to make things a bit more interesting, I decided to tackle this level after shrinking the player down. This area looks a lot bigger this way, but it's actually a little easier to evade the partygoers since I no longer need to duck beneath the tables. Popping the balloons is a bit more difficult though, since they're not only hard to reach, but I can't see when the partygoers are approaching either. After hiding under this table, something odd happened. This particular partygoer seems to have just broken. They're just standing next to this doorway completely still, and because of this, I was reluctant to run out. It turns out they're fully broken though, and they never gave chase at all. I found the key hidden in the very back of the dining area, and from here it was just a matter of escaping. Fortunately, the entities made it easy, and I made it out without a hitch. After dropping our key into the machine, we'll head into the pink hallway so we can obtain the next. This section is actually pretty easy to complete, as all we do is play a quick game of Simon Says using the television and some balloons. At this point, I decided to skip the minigame entirely because this is horoscoped after all. So, by deleting the locked door, we can just waltz in to collect our key like we own the place. No puzzles required. required. However, I was curious what would happen if we played the game anyways, and to no one's surprise, nothing happened. I don't know what I expected, but it was probably this. Back in the lobby, I decided to run down this dark blue hallway for the next key. In order to reach the end of this level, we'll have to use these fireworks and throw them at the party hosts. This entity appears to be a cake with an eyeball that can be found on the walls and ceiling of this area. Anytime they spot us, they'll alert the partygoers to our location, where they'll then run out to these locked doors to chase us. After reaching this room at the end, we can grab the key and return to the lobby to complete this section. Restarting this area, there are a couple of things I wanted to check out. First, I was curious what was behind the doors that the partygoers will attack from. In this entrance, this boarded up door does not lead us anywhere, and it's completely empty inside. So, when the party host spots the player, these entities will load in behind the locked doors and sprint out at us. The room itself doesn't have anything in it besides 2 windows and a couple of posters. I wanted to try to make this area safe, but because the partygoers weren't always loaded in, I can't just delete them. I can, however, delete the floor where they appear, and as you can see, they'll fall straight into the void. Knowing this, I delete some more pieces of flooring in front of the doors ahead, and when loading in, they'll run straight into the hole. Though they'll keep coming back endlessly, we are completely safe here. At the end section of the level, I did this again, which made the whole process a lot easier. Because my pitfall trap was keeping the entities at bay, I could just grab the key and leave. Finally, there is the red hallway, and here we'll arrive at a neon-styled arcade. Our main objective is to illuminate a set of symbols found in the map using colored glow sticks. There are several hallways to explore, and our only enemy is a lone partygoer who patrols the upstairs area. This area is pretty hard to navigate because of how dark it is, but with the lights turned on, it's a little easier to see. One of the first things I noticed was a hallway in the back that I initially missed, and inside is a wall that says, "Don't turn around." Nothing happens when we turn around though, and when viewed from another angle, there's nothing seen behind us. So suffice to say, we've been successfully pranked. There's really not much to see in this level, so instead of hunting for the symbols, I completely bypassed the need to go upstairs by once again breaking the door. I then return to the main party area to use my keys, and after opening the gate, we arrive at level 52, the school halls. Here we enter the hallways of a dimly lit school. We suddenly meet up with a party pooper here, and this is the first truly friendly entity we've met in this game. They're wearing a mask with a hoodie over top, and they'll basically just lead us through the school area safely, preventing us from being attacked by the surrounding party goers. This level isn't all that big, but it is full of threats at every turn. With the lights turned on, I turned my attention to the party pooper. I was curious if there was anything beyond their mask, and to my surprise, there is what looks like a human inside. They're textured jet black, and they have noticeable features such as eyes and hair. We're not the only ones susceptible to partygoers here, as the party pooper can also be caught and killed on this level, and it's honestly super funny. When our enemies are alerted, they'll attack both the player and our friend here, but rather than exploding, they'll fly around the room violently. Somehow they managed to transcend time as well, because even though the game is running at 1/10 its normal speed, this sequence plays out as normal. They look like a deflating balloon whipping around the room aimlessly, making for one glorious death animation. Because of this level's linear progression, there's not a whole lot for us to see off camera, so we're going to head upstairs and into what is now the final level in Escape the Backrooms, level 55.1. Entering the tunnel level, there are several resources for us to snag, alongside the main tool we'll be using throughout this location, a photo camera. Here, we ride this elevator down multiple levels, taking pictures of each subject the camera displays. First, there is some text on a wall, followed by a blockaded entrance to level 0. Next is the icy rooms, where we must find and photograph a broken down van, and then snag a picture of the howler that's roaming this floor. At the bottom, we'll have to take a picture of 3 Moai statues and then a skin stealer, all the while avoiding an army of smilers hunting us down. When viewed from another angle, this map actually looks pretty cool. Each of the areas we are meant to explore are stacked on top of each other, all built around the elevator shaft in the center. Something you'll immediately notice is that each of these individual sections will be mostly unloaded until the camera is brought down to its level. This is to prevent unnecessary strain on your machine. And as we fly around, we can watch as each one populates. If we fly down to level 0.11, you can see that each of the entities we encounter here are already loaded in. This includes a handful of smilers and a single untransformed skin stealer. When unpaused, they'll simply roam this area aimlessly, waiting to come in contact with the player. I went ahead and started taking photos on level 0.2, and when moving the camera around, I accidentally unload this floor entirely, sending me flying into the void uncontrollably. restarting the level, and then headed back to the remodeled mess and destroyed the barrier blocking our entry. We can run around this pillared room as much as we want, but I didn't realize a pretty big mistake had been made. When deleting the caution tape, I somehow broke this area and could no longer photograph it to continue. So I had to restart the level once again before I could properly take the picture and move on. Heading down to 0.3, the icy rooms, we can see that the howler, also known as the bacteria, is now present and patrolling this floor. I wasn't able to locate this entity previously, nor could I find it anywhere out of bounds, so I'm assuming they loaded in when I took the elevator down here. This howler behaves like the version we saw in level 0.11, as they'll only give chase when it spots the player. Otherwise, they will explore endlessly. I figured it'd be easier to get a photo of this creature by leading it to the elevator, but for some reason it wouldn't trigger until I raised the elevator up and it walked away. Now, when the player finishes capturing each of the required pictures, a grate will open above the elevator, which gives us access to another floor. Heading up there, we'll find a grassy, overgrown room that appears similar to level 0. There are 2 inaccessible doors, as well as a staticky TV, but only the door in front of us leads anywhere. Jumping into this bright light begins a cutscene where the player begins falling from the sky, and as this cutscene ends, the credits will roll. We can see that as this area loads in, it will appear just above the entrance, connected to the main elevator shaft. Inside the grassy room, we can see that the doors surrounding us don't lead anywhere at all, and the bright room behind the doors is simply a small white hole that we jump down into. Unfortunately, the cutscene itself is only a video file, meaning we cannot move the camera around within it. What's funny though, is that the player is actually still able to move around when the final cutscene is playing, and we're now stuck down here with nowhere to go. It's preferable to falling thousands of feet to the ground, but there's not a whole lot of places we can go from here. But now we have some secret levels to go over that were added in, so let's rewind time a bit as we travel back through the game. We are going to be starting with a level called Overgrowth. In order to enter Overgrowth, we first access the bunker by reaching one of the game's endings, or using the MEG Hub's elevator. In my case, I was on a fresh save file, so I broke the door down instead because doors are for dweebs. In this location, there are 4 slides leading to a bone thief down below. You won't make it that far though, since the slides lead to spinning fan blades, which never ends well. You'll have to explore this room reminiscent of level 0, avoiding half a dozen bacteria along the way. Wanderers, are scattered throughout the level, and 4 of them must be sent down the slides so you can escape safely. Back at the start, you can once again see that we're quite silly in appearance, only now we look a bit different. We can now change our character's skin, with different colored suits or even holiday-themed outfits being available in the main menu. Down below we can see a couple of things, the first being our old friend, the Bone Thief. Like the last time we met this enemy, they're laying flat behind the shadow in the tunnel here, waiting for you to slide down so they can snatch you up. In front of this monster, you can see the bones they thieved, but there's not much to this that we haven't already seen. The room itself is an open space that we can't access during gameplay, since we'll get attacked as soon as we enter through the slide. But what's in the room on the other side? By moving the camera over here, you can see that the open space out of sight is a familiar room full of pillars with no entrances or exits. I thought there might be a way to enter this space naturally, but seeing how empty it is pretty much confirms it's only a set piece. One thing I found interesting about this space is that there are 2 sets of doors inside the dark tunnel. There's nothing extending past them, and we can never see them in the first place due to the large black barrier hiding the beast behind it. I'm pretty sure this was used previously in another level, but it looks a bit different this time, so I can't say that's true 100%. As for the slides, they're a bit of a rat's nest behind the scenes. Each slide has different paths, one leading to the Bone Thief's den, and one leading down into the void space. When you leave after sending your wanderer friends through, you'll go straight down instead, bypassing the fan route altogether. From another angle, we can follow the player into the slide, only to find that your physical body vanishes upon entering, and a bunch of chopped up pieces appear at the bottom if the fan hasn't been broken first. We need a buddy to take the fall for us before leaving is an option, so let's go socialize. When you enter the maze, you'll find yourself in this area visually similar to level 0, though it's loaded with various types of graffiti. It turns out that the devs refer to this location as graffiti level in the game's files, and this is probably why. There are tons of drawings and writings on the wall, but the one that most caught my eye was this one reading, "Hello Future Me." I'm not sure if this is a reference or something, but it stood out as just a bit creepier than the rest. Now that I've got a wanderer in tow, it's time to introduce him to his #1 fan. But before doing so, I found something utterly hilarious. What in the world is this pose? I'm carrying him to safety, evading the bacteria along the way, and the best he can muster is an "oh good heavens" pose. I don't know why this is so funny to me, but it had me laughing for a solid minute. When you look closely, you can actually see them shaking too. I'm unaware if this is intentional or something he managed to break, but it definitely adds to the frightened cat shtick he's been pulling all along. When sending our pal here down the slide, they actually appear inside and slide down. When appearing on the other side, their body is busting a move crazy style. They don't need all those pesky limbs, not when they're feeling the beat. Now, as for the bacteria, they can't chase you outside the mazes themselves due to a gate closing in front of them. As it turns out, the gate doesn't really mean anything, as we can remove it altogether without affecting the bacteria's path. Their nav mesh doesn't allow them beyond these specific places, so we may as well not exist to them once we make it out. With another wanderer in hand, I decided to make him some new friends for the ride down. I did so by manually duplicating the entity, and although each of them is labeled Explorer 2, the game still allowed me to send them down the slide. Don't worry, only one wanderer was harmed during the escaping of these backrooms. After popping out of the slides, you'll now arrive at the Grassrooms. This is a strangely colorful level where you actually get to go outside for a bit. The place is cozy, but it's also dangerous, as you can't hold still for too long without vines crawling up and entangling you. In multiplayer, you can't escape them, but running it solo means instant death. In order to continue, levers are used to cross these gaps via suspension bridges. You can then grab a knife, cutting the rope to drop this board. From here, you break the glass using this odd mechanism, pressing forward where buttons are used to unlock a series of doors, all while avoiding standing still for too long. Eventually, you reach an elevator on the other side, leading to the empty city ending. So jumping back, I wanted to first appreciate the level's overall appearance. This doesn't feel like a Backrooms level to me, and despite the risk of danger when standing still, it's a weirdly peaceful place with quite the view. Well, until you look closer anyway. When I looked more closely at the grass blowing in the breeze, it became clear how the effect is done. The blades aren't moving individually, but instead the entire thing moves like ocean waves rising and falling. It's really hard to unsee, and I'm finding myself a bit seasick over here. Taking the camera back, we can see the level from an outside perspective. These giant pipes you see here are visible from inside the map, and they completely tower over the rest of the level. From out here, we can see that these objects, alongside the catwalks overhead, extend out into the void where they come to a stop. Not far from this spot, there's a large rectangular platform beneath the level. It's a pretty big flat rectangle with stretched textures. I believe this is a piece of the terrain for the grass without the actual grass on top, and may have been used during the map's construction. It looks super stretched out though, so I could be wrong about that. Something I almost didn't notice during my first playthrough is the giant pit of pointy demise. This pitfall is pretty deep, with a ton of spikes at the bottom, and I can't tell if they're supposed to be rusty spikes or thorns maybe. It would make sense if these were formed by the unseen entity, waiting to ensnare the player, especially since we can find similar vines at their base. Since we're talking about the vines, this is what the animation looks like from another angle. They creep up from the grass below, violently shaking as they continue to grow. This isn't easy to see during gameplay, but in bold time, you can see this super clearly. Also, the hilarious death animation that follows. The worst death in Backrooms history, folks? Death by Stanky Leg. I tried shrinking the player to see how it impacted the animation, and while the vines didn't change size to match me, the animation got a lot crazier. The parameters for the sequence have shrunk down, meaning all the roots appear in a condensed ball instead. Of course, the inverse takes place when we enlarge the player too, with the vines staying small comparatively, but still ascending your body completely. There's a machine ahead that carries you across these gaps in the scaffolding, but there's more to it than is currently visible. On the other side of this wall, there's an entire mechanism hidden from view, including a track that it moves across. I find it strange that they left it out of sight instead of bringing it out so we can see it, since it looks a lot more functional with all the pieces involved. With that being said, the following room contains quite the mystery. In order to continue through the Grassrooms, this spool needs to be cut down using a knife to break the glass down below. While taking another step through this area, I began to wonder, why is this even here? Either the random generation of the Backrooms created this strangely functional contraption, or someone who explored this before you did. It's honestly pretty unfortunate if you think about it. They managed to put this whole setup together with the rope in place and everything, but something got to them before they could use it. When the rope is cut, the giant wooden spool will drop straight down, shattering the glass below and opening the path forward. In the next part of the level, there's a catwalk overlooking the puzzle area from above, and as far as I'm aware, it's completely out of our reach. Instead of just checking out with the camera, I teleported myself up here for a closer look instead. I missed the mark the first time, which, as you can clearly see, didn't go super well. Once I landed here safely though, I could begin exploring out of bounds. There are invisible boundaries that keep you from walking around too much, but if you're careful, you can make it across to this doorway up top. This scaffolding lets you run across it just as I hoped, and we can even crouch through the doorway to enter the previous room. For some unexplained reason, there's a spot over here with a staircase and grass that extends way out of view. I can't imagine why this is here, considering the player can't get to this point during gameplay to begin with. This grass will still try to kill you in this cozy corner, and there's a window up top that makes this place feel weirdly comfortable, despite the context. So instead of completing the puzzles ahead, I decided it was time to get a move on. I smote the door with my divine power and entered the elevator. An elevator that doesn't do anything once it's activated, by the way. A video just plays over your screen instead, and unfortunately, we can't explore this cutscene due to this fact. Now, if you've gotten the wrong door ending at least once, you can access level 974 using a separate path in level 6. When entering, you load into this giant pink house that almost resembles a dollhouse. There's an entity here named Mr. Kitty, and he's not exactly a friendly face. As you travel the halls of the space looking for toys, Mr. Kitty will follow you without end. He doesn't move when being watched, making him a strange mixture of Slender Man and SCP-173. You have to navigate the tight halls carefully to not get backed into a corner, grabbing all the lost toys and placing them by this stage. Entering the stage opens the curtain, revealing these trapped wanderers with a dangerous guest entering the room from above. Jumping back a bit, let's take a quick look at Mr. Kitty up close. He's a tall, lanky character who kinda looks like he's made of meatloaf. I can't tell exactly what this enemy is supposed to be, but something you can see better from this angle is the spikes on his arms. He has no hands, so peace was never an option. It's really creepy seeing them up close like this, because now we know exactly what's stalking us through the halls in excruciating detail. Unlike monsters in other games who just warp when your back is turned, Mr. Kitty here will teleport to a nearby location and just start walking. This eventually led to a jump scare, where he reels back and throws his spiky little nubs at you, resulting in death by explosion. After all of this, I still have zero clue why he's named Mr. Kitty. If we move the camera back, we can see the entire map from another perspective. And in a way, it really does look like a dollhouse. There are several floors full of bedrooms, bathrooms, hallways, and even spaces for recreation. Finding all the toys needed to complete the level is super tough, because this place is way bigger when viewed from out of bounds. While exploring out in the great beyond, I found this black barrier outside this wall here. These black barriers are typically used to obscure the entrance or exit, so you can't see what's on the other side. But in this case, it doesn't really serve a purpose. This may have been a doorway or window at one point, which is the only reason I can imagine this would be here. Let's take a moment to mess with Mr. Kitty though. In order to do this, I broke the wall down in the main area, stepping out onto this large platform surrounding the house. I'm pretty sure his nav mesh only extends as far as the house's walls, since he completely broke the moment I stepped outside. You can see from this angle that he activates the moment we step back inside, stopping when we leave once more. He also warps across the level when we step back inside from another location, so no matter how hard you try, outrunning him simply wouldn't work. In the meantime though, we can run around out here in the back rooms of the back rooms without any danger, something I found weirdly peaceful. Back in the main room of the house, I deleted the curtain to take a peek behind it early. This revealed that the barbershop quartet was already here the moment we let it in. Though they're not exactly singing show tunes. They never move from this location either, which makes replaying this part of the game pretty creepy. Mr. Kitty lurking doesn't help that fact either. In order to get things going, I went ahead and duplicated the first toy I found as well. But Graffiti had other plans today. They all just lined up here on stage in front of each other, waiting to be picked up and placed in a seat. It's interesting because they all worked as expected, despite being copies of only a single toy. Also, when the ending is taking place, the player falls unconscious, resulting in this hilarious pose. We can freely look around, and this is what that looks like from another angle. I'm straight up breaking it down out here, and nobody can stop me. Now on level 188, a section that I previously covered, there's a secret now hidden behind the Arania Membri. If you manage to sneak past this monster, you can enter the door behind them and enter level you cheated. It's a room that is meant to catch cheaters in the act, basically calling you out for breaking the game and dropping you into this joke level as a result. A knock on the door ahead can be heard when stepping inside, but that's all there is to it. No monsters, no items, just an empty space and plenty of time to think about what you did. From another angle, you can see that this is by far the smallest map in all of Escape the Backrooms, and it doesn't even classify as a level, because it's only an Easter egg. Even if we break down the door and try to walk through it, the hallway has no exit, and so we just stand around, looking like a total dork. I guess you can't cheat your way through a level you cheated. Well played, devs. Well played indeed. And with that, that's everything I found by dissecting and taking a look behind the scenes in Escape the Backrooms. It's been quite the journey over the years. I hope you enjoyed this, and of course, I'll see all of you in my next game-breaking video. Cheers!